1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced intimate partner violence. These individuals are not just statistics. They are someone's child, parent, sibling, friend, neighbor, and coworkers. And in this case, they are my coworkers. People I have the privilege of working alongside every single day. Both of the individuals you are about to hear from have impressive titles and accomplishments. Their bios are available for you to read, and I encourage you to do so at a later time. But right now, set aside titles, roles, and resumes. And instead, I invite you to listen with your heart and hear them simply as people. With that, please join me in welcoming Heidi DeFord.
I'm educated. I come from a good family. I have a law degree. In fact, I was prosecuting domestic violence at the time that these photos were taken. And I am one of 3. One of 3. That means if you look around this room today, if you think about the places that you spend time, the gym, your places of worship, your kids' school, your holiday tables, 1 in 3 people are experiencing intimate partner violence. It almost guarantees that someone in your circle is dealing with this in some way in their life, and you have no idea that it's going on. Now, I know for many of you, you've dedicated your careers to this work. For others, these are your least favorite cases to handle. The most frustrating, the most difficult. But what you do matters. Whether you're an advocate, or a prosecutor, or a concerned friend or family member, how we speak about people experiencing intimate partner violence matters. Not just when you're talking to the victims, or when you're in court, but when you speak about your cases and when you speak about these situations to your friends, your family, and your colleagues. It shapes the perceptions of others, and survivors and victims are listening. Think about this. Many victims, like myself, stay not only because of the fear and control of our batterers, but because of the shame and the embarrassment associated with our victimization. How many times have you heard somebody say, if I were her, I would just leave? Why should I care if she doesn't? If she doesn't want to be beaten up, she should just leave him. And so on and so on. We don't say that about any other victim. Ever heard anyone say that about somebody hit by a drunk driver? I mean, if they don't want to be in an accident, they shouldn't be on the road by themselves at 1 a.m. I mean, if you don't want to get in a crash, why don't you just stop driving? Ridiculous, right? Why aren't we saying the batterers should not be doing this? The offender should be accepting the help that she wants them to get. He should just leave her alone. The way society and many of us talk about this crime contributes to the shame and stigma associated with reporting. I also want you to remember that if you were a prosecutor in our office, or if you play any other role in the system, you are a role model to others. Your education, your training, your experience, and that of the Hennepin County Attorney's Office or your community-based agency carry with it credibility and weight, and with that, a responsibility. You need to be mindful of the messages that you are sending about victims and about intimate partner violence every time you discuss it. I'm going to leave you with this. The photos that you see are the last time I was assaulted. The time that lasted 2.5 hours, where I was bound, gagged, whipped, punched, and which nearly took my life. The culmination of 12 years of violence, 12 years of police calls, 12 years of silence and secrets, 12 years of physical and emotional pain, and 12 years of shame and embarrassment. My closely guarded secret became a very public issue and could have easily become front page news. Luckily, I had an enormous amount of support from my office at the time, where I was an assistant county attorney, and my friends and the community. But you know the one thing that I remember most vividly? The one statement that I can quote verbatim? I remember the victim advocate from a conflict county in the metro, not Hennepin, that was handling my case. And this victim advocate called me to talk about the multiple cases that they were now handling due to him violating the order for protection from jail several times, and for me doing the right thing by repeatedly making reports. This woman called me to discuss the cases, and she said to me, and I quote, "Well, I didn't know this was going to be a lifelong obligation." For 17 years, I remember what this victim advocate said to me, word for word. I remember how I felt in that moment, and it still upsets me today. I guarantee you, had I not had the strong support of a system and friends around me, I would have been done communicating with that office, period. What we do matters. What we say matters. Even when you think that it doesn't. Even when they go back to their batterer. Even when they fight you every step of the way. Even when they're not the perfect victim. It was the 1,000 little steps, the words and actions of myself and others that led me to safety. You are one of those steps in someone's journey. Don't take that for granted, and never forget how much it matters. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Daniel Bogert Pepping. Today, we applaud Daniel's bravery as he publicly shares his story for the first time. Daniel is 1 in 4 men who have experienced intimate partner violence, and I am honored to share the podium with him and stand in solidarity by him as he takes his first courageous step in his healing journey. Please welcome Daniel Bogert Pepping.
Thank you, Heidi, for that as well. So 12 million people are victims of intimate partner violence every year, and 10% of men in the United States have experienced it and reported that it had a substantial effect on their functioning. And so I'm one of those 10%. And it's why I'm especially grateful to be here with you and to see this amount of turnout today. It's incredibly meaningful. I come from an extraordinarily supportive and loving family. I graduated from college in 2015, moved back to Minnesota, where I grew up, to start my career. I started as a journalist in 2015 before I left to work in the Minnesota legislature in 2016. And 2016 is when the relationship in which this violence occurred started. And it ultimately crescendoed in 2019. For a long time during and after, I quite literally couldn't make the connection that I was experiencing domestic violence. It was like my brain simply wouldn't allow me to go there. was the blind spot of all blind spots for me. And it wasn't a case of me not wanting to admit it, at least not consciously to myself. And what I would hear if a friend told me, that I would immediately say, that's domestic violence, you're experiencing domestic violence. In my own head, it was nothing more than things just getting a little out of hand in my situation. And when it reached its worst in 2019, the potential of responding law enforcement taking my abuser's side, because she was a woman, was specifically weaponized against me by her. There's one key point with that I want to touch on. One night things were at their absolute worst. I had been punched, tackled. She engaged in self-harm in front of me and smeared her blood on my face and in my mouth. And I've often wondered why I didn't just use force to get out of that situation. I was a man. I was slightly larger. And I've been asked that as well. And I think that it's a question that I've come to expect when I speak about this. And the truth is that I had no faith that I could select the amount of force that would be safe for her and would get me out of that situation. So I used very little force at all that night. And it's an acute reminder for me of the sheer volume of dynamics behind every individual's behaviors on staying in a relationship, trying to leave and being successful, and on and on. It's an extremely acute sense of that. And the police were called by my friend that night. They responded, and I met them down on the street outside the apartment, and they asked if I was okay. I lied, and I said yes. Had they looked closer that night, they would have seen blood on my face. They would have seen shock in my eyes. But I lied because I was afraid the situation would be misunderstood. I was the victim, and I lied, not just because of my fear of how the perpetrator may react in the future, but because of the fear that I would be confused as the perpetrator, and that had been specifically weaponized against me. And so I wanted to share today, to show a face of this that we all rationally know exists. We know the stat about 1 in 4. And we don't see the same amount of focus or coverage. That is partially because it is more socially difficult at this time for men to talk about this. And we already know the horrible uphill battle that women face to be taken seriously, despite how much coverage there is in the news, how much representation there is with organizations focused on doing this incredible work to support them. And they still face an uphill battle, and that's been my experience as well. And so as a man delivering this message, I want to underscore the somewhat unique considerations that we may have in navigating these situations, speaking to law enforcement, seeking out help, and the internal difficulty that many survivors face in even accepting that something they experienced was actually an instance of domestic violence. And if we can keep that in mind, I do believe that that is our best and most required path toward a better future for all victims and survivors of domestic abuse, no matter their gender or their relationship status. Thank you.
I want to say thank you to Heidi and Daniel for sharing your stories with all of us. It really humanizes the work, and we're talking about people and lives here. Up next, I would like to welcome the director of our Domestic Abuse Service Center, which we all refer to as DASC, Siri Lokensgaard.
Hi everyone, I'm Siri Lokenskerd. As Jen said, I'm the director of the Domestic Abuse Service Center. And I'm just here briefly to talk about some of the services that we provide at DASC and just provide a little bit more context to what we do at the center. So just to provide some really brief historical context, the Domestic Abuse Service Center is nationally recognized, and we were established in 1994. And over the past, can't do math, but 32, something like that, plus years, we've really evolved. We're proudly adhering to our mission statement, which is on the screen, but I'm gonna read it out loud here. To respond to the needs of victims of domestic violence through a trauma-informed lens delivered by a diverse and inclusive staff that reflect the communities that we serve. So what do we do at the Domestic Abuse Service Center? The best way to explain it is DASC really serves as a place where victim survivors of domestic violence can receive multiple services in one centralized location. So oftentimes referred to as a one-stop shop or one-stop center. DASC is part of the Victim Witness Division, which is governed by the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. And we have recently moved. Historically, we were located in the lower level of the government center, but we moved about a year ago. So we are now located on A14. And what I'll say is that the folks that really took part in the creation and development of our new center did a wonderful job and were extremely intentional regarding from big details down to the smallest details to ensure that our space was truly victim-centered and trauma-informed. And if anyone is ever interested in a tour, please don't be a stranger. Feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to provide one. So to kind of assist us in this one-stop shop mentality, we have many partner organizations on site. And I know Mary earlier mentioned our partners, but I'm just gonna go a little bit more in depth about what they do. So the first is Central Minnesota Legal Services. If you're not familiar with Central Minnesota Legal Services, they are a legal aid organization here in Minnesota. And they are on site at DASC to provide pro bono, so free, legal representation and consultation to victim survivors of domestic violence. And not only do they assist with order for protection matters, but we know that when it comes to domestic violence, there are a lot of co-occurring issues as well that they might be navigating, especially as it pertains to systems. So they can also provide legal advice and representation on custody matters, child support, housing, etc. And again, they are a free referral on site at DASC. So if you're working with a victim survivor and they need to talk with an attorney, you can send them to DASC, and then that referral to speak with the attorney is free. We also have a prosecution team at DASC. Our prosecution team is made up of one Hennepin County attorney, one Minneapolis city attorney, Minneapolis police domestic violence investigators, a Hennepin County probation officer, paralegals from our office, and then also what we call 2 gone on arrival advocates. And the purpose of our prosecution team is to follow up on all Minneapolis domestic violence gone on arrival police reports. And if you're not familiar with gone on arrival, those reports basically just mean that when the report or the incident occurs or when law enforcement are contacted, by the time law enforcement arrive, the suspect is not present. Maybe they fled the scene, or maybe the report was made the day after, let's say, for example, in an order for protection violation. So when that report is made, they are all sent to our office, and we review all of those police reports. The review is done by a prosecutor. If it's a felony level, it's reviewed by a Hennepin County attorney. And then if it's a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor, it's followed up by the Minneapolis city attorney. And the prosecutors are looking through, what they're able to do with the police report. Are they able to charge the case, or do they need to assign the case to an investigator to gather more information? After they've reviewed the cases, then they will have an advocate follow up on those police reports. And the role of the advocate is to really follow up and let the victim know, hey, we received your police report, right? It's not just stuck in limbo, it went somewhere, right? Which I think a lot of times victim survivors make the report and they just never hear back about what happened. So we let them know we received your report, it was reviewed by the prosecutor. We tell them and share with them what the outcome is and really listen to them and gather their input. So for example, if the case is gonna be charged, some victims don't want charges for many reasons that we talked about so far today. And so our advocates will make sure that the prosecutor is aware of that input. Or maybe the case is not able to be charged because of X, Y, and Z. Our advocates are gonna talk with them about that, gather their input, and again, connect them with the prosecutor to have a further conversation. And then our advocates also will follow up, safety plan, and provide resources, whether it's an internal referral to the Domestic Abuse Service Center to get an order for protection, or to refer out to our wonderful partner organizations here today. We also partner with district court. One of the primary services that we offer at DASC is assisting with order for protections. We assist with about 80% of all order for protections in Hennepin County, which is a heavy lift. So we work very closely with district court to ensure that all of the paperwork that's needed is filed with the bench in a timely manner. If there's any questions from the bench, they can easily get those answers, get the paperwork corrected as needed, and get those order for protections submitted as soon as possible. And then we also partner with the Hennepin County Sheriff's Department to provide safety, not just for our staff, but for the community as well. One thing that I will say about DASC is we are equal access. So we do serve both folks who would like to file order for protections as well as folks who have had orders filed against them. So oftentimes at DASC, we do get both parties on site at the same time, right? In some situations following a domestic incident, it's sometimes a race down to our center to see who can file the first order. And so when that happens, we have a very intentional policy. We immediately get the parties separated, especially if they've seen each other already. We have them meet in separate spaces with separate advocates. And our new space on A14 really allows that, where they don't have to walk by each other. We have separate exits for them. And we work very closely with Hennepin County Security to ensure that folks get back to their transportation in a safe way. And so the Hennepin County Sheriff's Department, that's just one example where they are able to really assist to ensure safety for everyone. The other thing that they assist with, among many other things, they can also serve respondents at the Domestic Abuse Service Center if they show up to file something and they have not yet been served with an order for protection. And then last but not least, we have advocates on site. So we have both Hennepin County attorney advocates at DASC as well as community-based organizations as well. And in order to offer these services, we contract with, and I know Mary mentioned them earlier, but I'm just gonna read through them again. Asian Women United, Esperanza United, Division of Indian Work, SEWA, AIFW, which stands for Asian Indian Family Wellness, and the Domestic Abuse Project. We've also secured an African American grant with Office of Justice Program as well. One of the things that I will say about our domestic abuse contract, or Domestic Abuse Project contract, is it's a newest contract that we have at DASC, and it's quite unique. It is to work with folks who utilize abusive or harmful behaviors. And I'm not gonna go into too much detail about that right now. Sadie is here today that will speak a little bit later about kind of the approach and the philosophy to why intervention and prevention work is so important, and how that in turn is victim safety, right? So I won't steal the show from her, but just know she will be talking about that more in depth later. Also, in order to offer the services at DASC, or we offer several services at DASC that I mentioned, but that includes culturally specific and trauma-informed advocacy. We cannot stress how important it is at DASC for someone to be able to walk into our center or pick up the phone and have the option of working with someone who looks like them, speaks their language, or understands the different cultural barriers that they may face. because that's gonna look different for every single person that we work with. And the reason why I say optional is it really is victim-centered and victim-driven, right? So they get that choice. For some victims, they do wanna work with someone who understands maybe some of the cultural barriers that they're experiencing, right? For other victims though, they might not want to work with an advocate from their same community because the community is so small and they have concerns about, X, Y, and Z. So again, we are always giving them the option to choose. We also provide multilingual advocacy at DASC. So currently we have advocates that speak the following languages. English, Somali, Spanish, Hmong, Nepali, Hindi, Newari, Tamil, Telugu, and Sanskrit. And then if needed, we will utilize Language Line. The other newer service that we provide at the Domestic Abuse Service Center is assisting with extreme risk protection orders. Again, just kind of a setup for Raina and Bridget. They will be speaking about extreme risk protection orders in just a minute. But again, that is a newer initiative and newer work that we are doing at DASC as well. And I think with all of our partner organizations, I just want to say thank you for everything that you do. This work to combat domestic violence cannot be done alone, right? And collaboration really is key. So I appreciate all of you for the work that you do. How to access our services. I'm not doing a very good job with my clicker here. So currently, all of our services are offered both in person on a first come, first served walk-in basis, Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Or remotely as well via phone. And so one thing that I will say about that is pre-COVID, we were offering all of our services in person. During the pandemic, obviously, as many as all of you probably had to shift pretty quickly and offer services remotely. And one of the things that we did at DASC is we created what we called a COVID survey. And over the course of the pandemic, we gathered over 5,000 survey results. And what we were really trying to assess is how do folks prefer to access services? Does accessing services remotely versus in person remove barriers for the individual? So barriers like taking time off work, driving downtown, paying for parking. I know everyone's parking is free today, but we all know that parking downtown is quite expensive. Childcare, you name it. And as you can imagine, about 90% plus shared that accessing services remotely reduced those barriers for them, and that it was in fact safe to access our services remotely versus in person. We also assessed how folks prefer to access court hearings. Do they prefer to access in person or remote? And again, as you can imagine, 85% plus shared that they prefer to access court hearings remotely as well. And so those survey results really informed how we practiced moving forward. And so now, like I said, we offer services both remotely and in person. And doing so has really reduced barriers and increased access. And since 2022, every single year we have provided over 22,000 advocacy contacts each year. And then our survey results were also shared with Justice Skill Day at the time. And because of those results, it allowed order for protection initial appearances to remain remote as well. And then the last thing I just want to mention and talk about is our trauma-informed response. So in recognizing the dynamics of domestic violence that we've really talked about so far and will continue to talk about today, it's really essential for us as providers to remain trauma-informed. And this doesn't even scratch the surface, but what does that mean? It means first meeting individuals where they are at. Really respecting and understanding what a victim survivor is and is not willing to share, or what they are or are not able to do at the time. So for example, in order for protection, calling the police, right? Not the be-all end-all to safety. It is an option, but for some victim survivors, calling the police or filing an order for protection may actually decrease safety for them. It's also important to remember that trauma can impact individuals in many different ways And it can present in many different ways, right? There is no perfect victim. And remembering as providers, it has nothing to do with us and everything that has happened to the person that we are working with. And then lastly, it also means listening and supporting an individual and their decisions for safety without judgment. Thank you. Sorry.